Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for the second episode of Kamen Rider Gavv, and thus far, still really enjoying it. I feel like I'm still remaining kind of cautious, like I'm approaching it and dipping my toe in the water, where I'm excited, honestly. I'm really was looking forward to this week's episode. I think it was the first time I looked forward to Rider coming out weekly since probably the first few episodes of Gotchard before I knew what I was in for. And I really like that feeling, and there's a lot I like about the show, a lot I'm going to praise and talk about, but I'm also in this cautious area where I'm preparing myself to be disappointed. Not that the show has necessarily shown me anything that's making me think it'll disappoint me, but I went into Gotchard fairly optimistic, thinking oh, this will turn around, so I just don't want to set myself up for disappointment in a huge way. Just kind of almost expect it so I won't be disappointed when the disappointment happens, if that makes any sense. But anyway, I really like the pacing of this show so far. It has this really fun, fast energy where it doesn't feel like this slow thing, and it kind of keeps you engaged with a lot of action and momentum. But it's done a good job of actually taking its time setting up the series. We meet our female lead, who I believe her name is Sachika, in this episode, who runs the Fix-It business, which very much reminds me of the Fix-It business from Time Force. And we set her up and oh, Shoma's gonna work for her, and that will probably be a status quo later. It's kind of funny that he winds up leaving where I assume he's going to come back later, although there's something I like about that, which we'll get to. But we set her up in this episode, but we didn't fully set the status quo, because obviously Shoma left at the end. We're probably going to have him come back, but I like that we are starting to slowly roll things out. Same thing with Honto. We kind of teased his backstory, having a dark past with these monsters that attacked his family or his mother or whatever, and that's obviously probably going to set up something where he's going to be either mad or mistrustful at Gavv at first. But clearly they're all going to be friends, because the opening debuted this week, and so you see them all being friends, so we know it's going to happen eventually. But still, I like that it laid the groundwork for the status quo of our female lead, and for Honto's backstory and his role. But again, they're not fast-tracking it. A lot of other Rider series within the first or second episode would fast-track it so you know exactly what the status quo is. But I like that there's this little, pacing to it. And also, I do kind of like that aspect so far we have, and I'm curious how many weeks it'll go, of Shoma kind of meeting a different character every week and them teaching him something about humanity and stuff. I think that's a fun little beat. We got to see more of the villains this week. Last week it was really only showcasing the monster of the week to have someone to fight, but this one kind of gave us a glimpse at our main family of villains, and it's really interesting. I'm really intrigued by them so far. I think they have a lot of potential. We'll see how it goes, but thus far it definitely reminds me a little bit of Kiva, because you have that whole aspect of him probably being a half-breed and then being kind of a royal family type of deal. Also reminding me a lot of the Sonozaki family from Double, but again, not in a way that I feel that they're copying it as a checklist, but just I like that it could present some of those dynamics. But I think they set up a very intriguing set of villains so far, and I liked getting more of a taste of that. And yet again, they're kind of rolling it out without fully giving you everything about the status quo so far. And then some other stuff I like is I think it's so fun and dumb and kind of neat the way his powers just come from whatever he eats turns into that. That kind of gives an explanation of why it's silly, because it's probably tied to the villain's powers, that maybe that's why they eat that weird gloop, is they think it gives them stronger powers or whatever. So the idea that it explains why the forms are so silly, because this belt will transform whatever he eats into forms. It gives a legitimate lore reason for the powers to be kind of stupid looking. Not looking, I think the forms look good, but you know what I mean. It's silly. Kind of like with Gaim, it just kind of worked once you introduced this whole Helheim, Devil's Fruit stuff, which is crazy. I mean, it's not as dark feeling as that. Again, I'm not one of those, put Gaim on HBO people, but you know what I mean. I like that. I think it's fun. It's kind of weirdly gross that they look like it's coming out of his, other parts. He's eating the potato chips and he puts down a bucket like he's going to start pissing himself. But it's just kind of funny, and I like that it gives kind of a funny reason for the forms. And also, I gotta say, this episode is the potato chip form one that still looks kind of like a bee type thing to me, still design-wise. But in the episode, you get kind of a backstory about, obviously he's an alien who's trying Earth foods for the first time, but it's not just cold. He's heard about these from his mother, who is clearly having to eat the same slop as the alien people, and she's kind of reminiscing and shared stories with her son about, Earth foods, potato chips and stuff. So I liked that, because it gave kind of, this sounds overstating, but an emotional reason for these forms to have a connection to them, and to have these foods have a connection to them. And I'm not trying to look for reasons to hate on Gotchard or anything, but just comparing that to my lack of investment in Hotaro's attachment to the Chemies. Setting Setting aside my thoughts on the character, even if it was an actor and character I liked, I think that they did a poor job, for me at least, of getting me to connect with why he was connecting with the chemis. And it seems funny that within this episode, I really did feel that kind of emotional connection he has to food, because that is kind of a thing in real life. A lot of people will have emotional connections to certain foods or meals or whatever because of a memory with a family member or loved one. And so the idea that it was kind of this thing he shared with his family, and then now it's transferring to him getting to try these foods and manifest in a form, gave an oddly emotional connection to the food aspect of the potato chip, and it made it more of a memorable debut than most of the form debuts in most of the recent series. And also, on the flip side, it kind of gives a reason for them to debut kind of quickly, and you don't always need a story. I've talked about this with ability forms before, but you don't need a story for all of those necessarily, but I wish they would let them breathe. Oh, thankfully, it looks like next week we're not debuting another one right away, which is kind of nice. Like, it's just kind of nice to have debut potato chip and then show it off again next week and then just let it breathe. But regardless, you don't need a story for it. But the fact that we kind of see him later making this food diary and he's eating just a bunch of foods and it's kind of randomly making the forms, it just kind of sets up like that's why they exist. So it kind of gives a reason for them to be so rapid fire because it's just something that inherently happens. So it kind of gave an emotional reason for like why Earth foods mean so much to him and create these forms, but also gives a reason why they would be made really quickly and we'll probably see them in a rapid fire succession, I imagine. And the form itself I think is pretty good looking. It was a really fun fight. Again, kind of reminding me of Boom Boomjer, where the fight felt fun, unique, and memorable, especially the way the potato chip swords worked, where you have to hit things at a certain angle. It was almost like a weird Fruit Ninja type thing where if you don't hit it at the right angle, it'll collapse, but then they like reform. It was really cool. It was a fun and creative fight. I really liked it. It also, I think, started to establish what's going to be this reputation thing for the writer where people are discovering who he is. You know, the girl was initially scared of him, but I'm sure that there'll be like some back and forth with some people wondering who this mysterious writer is he evil, but then maybe gain a heroic reputation. We obviously see a little bit of that with Honto, so that was an interesting beat as well. I really liked this episode. I think it continued the momentum. I really still like the energy of the show. It's definitely got a fun, poppier energy. It's not super dark or anything like that, which I don't need it to be, but I'm glad that it's kind of subverted my expectations of, you know, when I first saw it, I thought it was just going to continue the same vibe as Gotchard, and while it's closer to something like Gotchard than Geats or Gaim or whatever, it definitely has its style all its own, a very clearly distinct style, like I said last time, from the set design, even the opening. And it kind of reminds me of actually going from Zexal to Arc 5 with Yu-Gi-Oh! I make a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Comparisons for some reason, but it reminds me of that, where I thought Arc 5 was just going to be a total continuation of Zexal, and you go into those first few episodes, and it does feel like that, but then once it gets going, it very clearly has its own identity. Also reminded me of how I was worried Zenkaiger was just, or Dawn Brothers was going to be Zenkaiger 2.0, and it proved me wrong. So I'm glad that while this has the funner, lighter vibe of Gotchard, it definitely has its own style. Like, I feel within 2 episodes, it already has its own identity more so than Gotchard, which I'm happy with. And again, I'm remaining very cautious, but I'm very excited to be so hyped about the series. Like, I'm legitimately curious about some of the mysteries. I think the way the powers work is super fun and ridiculous. It just kind of hits that Toku sweet spot of like, it's stupid and it's silly, but it's also kind of cool. And again, it's neat that they gave like a legitimate lore reason for why he would have these ridiculous forms that make sense. But anyways, guys, that's it for this one. Leave your thoughts below in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.